At number 10, a contortionist. In 2011, a lot of people were having valuables stolen on the route between Girona Airport and Barcelona, Spain. It was only an hour-long bus trip and the bags stayed in the baggage compartment. So, what was happening? It turns out a contortionist was working with accomplices to steal laptops and other valuables on the frequent trips. One man would load a suitcase onto the bus at the airport and then another man would pick it up in Barcelona. The contortionist in the suitcase would get out in between the stops and look for valuables with a flashlight. So the best joke about this one comes from a police spokesman. I believe this is what the British call an open and shut case. Because it's a suitcase. It's just funny.
Coming in at number 9 is John Paul Sr. As an American racing driver, John won the FIA World Challenge for Endurance Drivers in 1978 and 1980, and he won the Trans Am Cat 2 in the year in between, and that's about it in terms of his achievements. Now let's go in chronological order. In 1979, custom agents discovered weed residue on his boat and then found 710 kilograms of it in a nearby truck, which got him 3 years of probation. Then in 1981, his wife, who he had separated from, vanished into thin air, and then he divorced her. Very odd, no investigation into it, but moving on. Then in 1983, a man called Stephen Carson was shot 5 times in Florida, and he claimed it was John who shot him. He was then arrested before fleeing right before his trial. He was caught in Switzerland and then extradited the hell back to the US, where he was imprisoned by 1986. Then he tried to escape, failed, and was eventually granted parole in 1999. But there is more. After he got out, he met an office manager called Colleen Wood. It was a whirlwind romance. She sold her house and quit her job and moved in with him on his boat so they could go on some honeymoon round the world boat trip or something. But the next December, she too had disappeared into thin air. Paul was suspected but not charged, and he too then magically disappeared. A randomer saw him in the Fiji Islands and reported him, but nothing happened. The FBI are still looking for him to question him on Colleen's disappearance, and I feel like they should add his first wife's case into it as well. Like, nobody's looking for her. They should be. At number 8, we have Bible John. Ah, you son of a gun. The Bible John is an unknown serial killer that killed 3 women in Scotland back at the end of the 60s. The man had a specific type: young, brunette, attractive. Kinda sounds like me, to be honest. Now, each woman had met him at the Barrowland Ballroom and then I guess got led away by him. The first victim was 25-year-old Patricia Docker, who was found in a garage doorway. Cause of death: strangulation. The second victim was 32-year-old mother of 3, Jemima McDonald, who actually had eyewitnesses. They saw her leaving with a brunette tall man who had a Glaswegian accent and kept quoting the Bible, hence the name Bible John. The 2 murders gave up no suspects, and initially the police didn't even think they were murdered by the same person, despite all the shocking similarities between both crimes. The third victim was 29-year-old Helen Putek, who had been badly beaten and raped. Helen met the man with her sister Jean, and he had introduced himself as John. When the third case was brought to light, it was clear they had a serial killer on their hands, and despite having countless suspects, including serial killer Peter Tobin, there was no arrest or conviction made. Bible John never killed again, but he's still out there somewhere when he should be in jail. Filling at number 7 slot is William Morales. So this man was the chief bomb maker for the Armed Forces of National Liberation, which was a Puerto Rican paramilitary organization that wanted Puerto Rico to be independent. William had joined the FALN by 1970 and was implicated in around 50 bombings within 4 years. The worst incident occurred in January of 1975 when the Francis Tavern Museum was bombed, killing 4 people and injuring over 50. William was actually interviewed by the FBI in 76 but was let go since they thought he was just an activist and not a suspect. Oh boy, was you wrong. 2 years later, William was in the middle of making a pipe bomb, but he messed up. The timer on his bombs was set by the hour hand, but he had filed down the minute hand by accident, and so the bomb detonated in his hand 4 hours early, and he got it bad. He lost an eye, 9 fingers, his lips, his jaw was fractured, and of course, he had passed out. When he woke up, he tried destroying the evidence before the police could get there, but when they did, authorities found 200 pounds of explosives and 66 sticks of dynamite, and they took him to a hospital because, criminal as he may have been, his injuries were extensive and dire. He was convicted in 1979 and sentenced to 99 years in jail, but after being moved from prison to Bellevue General Hospital, he managed to escape out of his window. He quickly fled to Mexico, and despite being caught, he wasn't extradited and then just went to Cuba to live since being given political asylum. But till this day, he's still on the FBI's most wanted terrorist list, process with a reward of $100,000 being offered for him. Now number 6 is Ismael El Mayo Zambada. Now this man is suspected to be a massive drug lord and leader of the Sinaloa cartel, because believe it or not, Narcos Mexico was based on a true story. He started off smuggling a few kilos here and there before solidifying himself as a cocaine trafficker. When El Padrino was arrested, his cartel split into two factions, the Tijuana cartel and the Sinaloa cartel. In 2006, the government launched a major offensive against drug trafficking and the Tijuana cartel got screwed, which led the Sinaloa cartel swoop in and take their territories, and thus war ensued. Their cartel brings in multi-tons of cocaine and distributes them all over the US. He's been wanted by Mexico's Attorney General since 1998. People think he had plastic surgery done so he would become unrecognizable just so he wouldn't have to leave Mexico and live in hiding. The FBI is offering $5 million for any information about him. Damn, Zeddy El Mayo. Gotta go on. Coming in at number 5 is Ani Nuvoyen. Now good old Ani over here was the biggest perpetrator of employment fraud in Estonia ever, and this is how he did it. Don't get any ideas. Now he would post huge ads on behalf of Interwork Corporation about various jobs in the Middle East, Europe, and South America. People who applied had to pay a fee in advance to pay for the foreign passport, travel fees, etc. And keep in mind, unemployment was at a high of 17%, and the fee he was asking for was 2,335 kroon, despite the average salary at the time being just 1,070 kroon. He also used many designer brands as tactics by saying they were limited jobs, so people started bribing him 1,200 kroons to be bumped up in the queue for a job. Ani told everyone that visas, info, tickets, everything would be handed over to them on March 23rd, 1999. But alas, his office had already closed back in February, so when the job seekers got there, they found all their documents that they had sent in the trash. But honestly, they should have done more research. One of Ani's listed business addresses was a literal wasteland. Like, come on, people. Around 3,000 to 5,000 people got scammed by him, making him a hefty profit. By 1993, Ani started going by the name Daniel Rosenberg and was advertising shady cars online and again defrauding people. Then the next year he went to Norway and started offering impoverished people jobs in Bulgaria, again manipulating 400 people. This guy made over 10 million kroons and was never caught. He went around defrauding half of Europe and wasn't caught. Come on now. And number 4 is Christopher Dale Flannery, aka Mr. Rent-A-Kill. This Australian contract killer had it rough from the start. By 17 years old, he'd been convicted of carrying firearms, police assault, housebreaking, and more. When he was finally released from jail, he became a bouncer, but seeing how that was boring, he moved on to contract killing, as everybody does. His first kill was a barrister called Roger Wilson, but since they didn't find the body, he was acquitted. He was then almost immediately arrested for killing Raymond Loxley, a brothel owner, 2 years prior. And again, he was acquitted. After that, he tried to improve his life and, just be on the right track by moving to Sydney and working as a bodyguard for crime figure George Freeman. Caught in the gang wars, he got paranoid and would always carry a gun with him wherever he went. In 1984, he was suspected of attempting to kill a drug squad detective, and things got messy when shots rained down on Christopher's house. Everyone survived and business continued. The next year, he was sent to kill Tony Spaghetti Eustace, and he managed to shoot him 6 times, but not enough to actually kill him. Police tried to speak to him, but he told them to F off, and then he died. Later that year, his boss Freeman called him for a meeting, and as he left, he caught a cab and went on his way. But he disappeared, leaving 2 children behind, never to return. So either Freeman killed him or he split because he was scared he would be killed. Either way, he's a fugitive on the run. Filling our number 3 slot is Hayat Boubakeur. Now Hayat had her fair share of a bad life. Her mum died when she was 8, her dad wasn't there, and she was tossed between families and foster care and was beaten numerous times. In July of 2009, she married Ahmadi Coulibaly, and both were Muslim and extremely religious to an extremist level. In 2010, police found a bunch of assault rifle ammunition in their apartment, which is, not the best. Now Hayat was sought after by authorities because her husband was the prime suspect for the 2015 Montrouge shooting that was one of the Ile-de-France attacks. The shooting involved 3 attackers that killed 17 people before the police eventually shot all 3, and Ahmadi was one of them. But before any of this even happened, he had already helped Hayat flee the country. She traveled to Spain at the end of 2014 and then made it to Istanbul, where Turkish intelligence found a it to be sus. They surveilled her for the next 2 days, after which she went to the Syrian border. At this time, her husband had just used her car in another attack and she was complicit in it. She's still currently wanted for helping Ahmadi carry out his attacks and has been dubbed France's most wanted woman. Now at number 2 is Lord Lucan, aka Richard John Bingham, the 7th Earl of Lucan. I know, right? I love when noble people are on here, it's just that much juicier. So after World War II, Lucan was studying at Eton College, which is a very posh all-boys college in the UK for like the 1%. Now sadly, he took a liking to gambling and went on to become a professional gambler. The man was so hot he was even considered to play James Bond, like, hello. He was hot. By 1963, he married Veronica Duncan and the couple had 3 children together, but after 9 years together, the marriage was going up in flames. Lucan moved out of the family home and a huge custody battle occurred over the kids, which he lost. After taking so many hits in his personal life, Lucan became depressed, paranoid, and erratic. All his gambling losses didn't help the situation either. To try and get custody, he started spying on Veronica to prove she was unfit to raise the kids since she had postnatal depression and had just fired their long-term nanny. After many nannies came Sandra Rivet in 1974. On the 7th of November, after putting the kids to bed, she went to the basement to make tea for Veronica, and once there, someone bludgeoned her to death with a lead pipe as the murderer told her to shut up. Apparently, Veronica heard her husband's voice and went down there, wherein they started fighting as well. Eventually, he admitted he had just killed Sandra, and Veronica agreed to help him escape. But the smart girl made a run for it and got away, after which Lord Lucan just disappeared. He called his mother and went to a friend's house, and then literally into thin air, he was gone. He literally evaporated. I don't get how someone so prolific like him could have successfully hidden for that long. He was declared legally dead in 2016 at age 81, but you can't just assume someone's dead because they're 80 years old. Come on now. People live long lives. And finally, at number 1 is Assata Shakur. Now this woman has racked up quite a few charges in her long life. As a former member of the Black Liberation Army and Black Panther Party, political and racial activism were her whole life. And the BLA engaged in many armed shootouts against the government since they would rob banks and kill police officers. At the start of the 70s, there was a multi-state manhunt for her after she had robbed a bank in Queens, then in the Bronx, and even a church, which was called Our Lady of the Presentation Church. The manhunt started after the FBI believed she was the head of a BLA cell that had killed a bunch of police officers. During the New Jersey Turnpike shootout, Assata killed Trooper Werner Forrester by shooting him in the head twice with his own gun, but both sides had been wounded. Between 1973 and 77, she had been indicted 10 times for kidnapping a heroin dealer, 2 bank robberies, 2 attempted murders of officers, and the rest of the charges were due to Turnpike. Many trials and mistrials occurred, of which she was only convicted once, acquitted thrice, and dismissed thrice. She was kept at Rikers Island in solitary confinement, but fellow BLA member Angela Davis claimed she was a political prisoner, so they started planning her escape. 3 members of the army got to the prison with dynamite and 2 guns, taking 2 officers hostage before escaping in a van. Wanted posters were put up for her, but in retaliation, her supporters put up Assata Shakur is welcome here posters in response. In 1984, she was given political asylum in Cuba, but the FBI is still offering $2 million for her. Fun fact, she's actually Tupac's godmother and step-aunt. Pretty cool. Starting us off with number 10 is Jack the Stripper, not to be confused with his earlier inspiration Jack the Ripper. So back in 1964 and 65, there occurred in London, England, the Hammersmith nude murders. Those murders encompassed the brutal killing of 6 prostitutes, all of whom were found naked inside or near the River Thames. He killed 2 women before the 6th, and it's not confirmed he was the perpetrator, but it was very likely. The first early victim was 21-year-old Elizabeth Figg, who was found strangled and naked on a north bank of the river. The second victim was 22-year-old Gwyneth Reese, the third was Hannah Tailford, then came Irene Lockwood, Helen Barthélemy, the 6th was Mary Fleming, and the last 2 were Frances Brown and Bridget O'Hara, but interestingly enough, these 2 girls weren't found anywhere near the river. A sketch of the murderer made him seem quite young at the time, and despite there being many suspects, the person was never captured, meaning someone is hiding out there who's killed 8 people and probably more. Coming in at number 9 is Vassilis Paliaukostas. From the name, you can probably guess that Vassilis is Greek and was accused of being the mastermind behind kidnapping industrialist Yorios Milonas. Greek names are very hard, you guys, just give me a break. The ransom paid for him was eventually traced back to Vassilis, making him the prime and only suspect. Then in 2000, he was convicted for kidnapping the CEO of Hayat Bros back in 1995 and sentenced to 25 years in jail. In June of 2006, two of his accomplices hired a sightseeing helicopter and then hijacked it and forced the pilot to fly to the prison at gunpoint. Guards thought the helicopter were prison inspectors and let the prisoners be flown to a cemetery next to the jail where they all fled, Vassilis included. He was recaptured in 2008 but escaped yet again a year later by helicopter again. A rope ladder was thrown down for him and his cellmate as the helicopter hovered above the jail courtyard. Guards tried firing at the lady in the helicopter, but she had a damn automatic rifle, so they obviously lost. The helicopter was found abandoned in a suburb in Athens with the pilot bound and gagged. There's currently a €1 million bounty placed on any information about Vassilis' whereabouts. Honestly, pat on the back for me for trying to pronounce these Greek names. They all are complicated as hell. At number 8, we have Omid Tavili. Iranian-Canadian Omid is a gangster who was the kingpin of a huge crime family in Canada. The RCMP revealed he was arrested back in 2000 for having 3 kilograms of cocaine on him, but was found not guilty. He then ran a scam telemarketing business aimed at Americans and ended up stealing $3 million, mostly from old people that just fell for the scam. He was arrested in British Columbia in 2003 after the US District Court issued a federal arrest warrant for him. 2 years later, he realized $300,000 of his drug money had gone missing and guessed it was his career that had taken it and fled. So to enact revenge, he kidnapped the dude's brother-in-law, sexually assaulted him, and then interrogated him before getting arrested himself. In 2007, the BC Supreme Court ordered him to be extradited to the US, but that didn't scare Omid since Amandeep Singh was his lawyer. The criminal and extradition lawyer that literally represents all these controversial criminals like Rakesh Saxena. Like, you know he's getting a lot of money for defending these criminals, but whatever. Either way, they filed for an appeal, and while waiting for the result, Omid disguised himself as janitor Edwin Teesney and escaped from jail. No one knows where he is today. Filling at number 7 slot is Alfred Stark. At 92 years old, this man committed heinous war crimes when he was a Nazi in the 40s. Anyway, he was accused of ordering the execution of 117 Italian prisoners of war. This was part of the slaughter of nearly 9,500 officers after the Germany-Italy alliance went to shit. The military court of Rome literally indicted him in 2012 and sentenced him to life in prison, but Germany still refuses to extradite him to Italy to serve his sentence. I've heard about a lot of Nazis that fled to South America and are just living there under new names, but this dude is literally sat at home in Germany hiding in plain sight because he knows the government won't do shit. Like, this man committed war crimes. Those are crimes against humanity and he has to be punished for them. Now at number 6 is John Rufo. Now this guy was the president of CCS, which is an IBM equipment reseller, before he went into hiding, so I mean, the man had moolah. Either way, in 1992 he met with his friend Edward J. Reynes, who had just been laid off from Philip Morris USA, and he told John about Project Star. It involved pitching a fake project to various bank executives claiming they were working on a top secret operation to develop smokeless cigarettes on behalf of Philip Morris. Newsflash, they're called vapes. Either way, John had a company, so it was very easy to forge everything they needed, and because Edward used to work with Philip, they never actually had to contact him. It was all going to plan until 96 when an employee noticed something off in one of the documents. He contacted Philip, then the FBI, and then everything went tits up. The duo had managed to get $350 million, but the FBI couldn't locate 21 million of it, so either way, where did it go? Edward was arrested and John went on the run. He didn't turn himself in and was last seen taking money out of an ATM before never being seen again. His car was found abandoned at JFK Airport and he's currently still in hiding. $25,000 is being offered for any information on him, and he's actually in the US Marshals 15 most wanted list. Coming in at number 5 is Iqlaq Fakir Mohammed Sheikh. The Indian 29-year-old murderer has been in hiding since 2006. Gojin Kovino was an archaeologist that was a part of the Afar expedition undertaken in Ethiopia that led to the discovery of the skeleton Lucy. She was working at the Nepal Research Center and had moved there in 1984. For some reason, and no one knows why, I couldn't figure out why or find out why, but Iqlaq stabbed her to death before beheading her. She's an archaeologist, what did she do? Bund Garden police found her head within 7 hours of the murder and arrested him. The police then gave him 2 weeks parole to try and care for his sick wife, but that was the last time he was seen. They're assuming he ran off with his wife and mum and is currently still in hiding. I just don't get what possessed him to do that. And number 4 is Gilbert Winter. British-born Gilbert worked as a jeweler by day and enforcer for the Addams Family crime syndicate by night. Who knew a jeweler's life could be that dangerous? Nobody. Now, the Addams Family, aka the Clerkenwell crime syndicate, is an Irish Irish criminal organisation and is one of the most powerful ones in the UK. They're worth £200 million and have been linked to nearly 30 murders. In 1994, Gilbert and fellow enforcer Ray Barton ended up killing a drug dealer called Claude Mosley with a samurai sword, which, I mean, fashionable, I have to say. They offed Claude because he was pocketing money from a drug operation run by the Adams family, and that didn't go down well with them. Gilbert was put on trial for the murder, but since no one would testify, the case was dropped. Fast forward to March 1998, Gilbert vanishes into thin air. He was involved in a weed deal in which £800,000 went missing, so either he ran off with the money or the gang killed him. Saul in the home, the family's financial advisor, who was also part of that deal, was shot months later, so people think Gilbert disappeared so the family wouldn't kill him. Regardless, he's still a murderer and he's still wanted. Filling at number 3 slot is Achimez Gachiyayev. This guy used to serve in the Russian Strategic Rocket Forces and had been accused of being involved in the Russian apartment bombings of 1999 that killed nearly 300 people and kickstarted the Second Chechen War. 4 bombings took place between September 4th and 9th and targeted 4 apartment blocks. The bombs were later found on grounds that Achimez rented with 2 other people who founded his company. After the first 2 bombs went off, he actually called the police and warned them, so maybe he had had a change of heart midway. According to the Federal Security Service of Russia, he was given $500,000 from warlord Ibn al-Khattab for doing the deed. As the case was further investigated, Achimez fled to Georgia and then Turkey. He was last seen in March of 2002 and is still a fugitive in hiding that is wanted for terrorism. Now at number 2 is Pedro Alonso Lopez. Known as the Monster of the Andes, Pedro is a serial killer who took the lives of many. Growing up, his mother worked as a prostitute, which had adverse effects on him. When he was 8, he was caught touching his younger sister, which caused him to get kicked out of his home. He then fled to Colombia, where a man took him in and repeatedly sodomized him, and the abuse continued even from other males after that. At 18 years old, he started stealing cars for a living and was soon caught and arrested. Apparently, while he was in jail, he was gang and that left him so angry he killed all those involved while he was still in jail. When he got out though, he started killing girls in Peru, and by 1978 he had murdered over 100 people. The police had him but released him, and so he moved to Ecuador, killing up to 3 girls a week. By 1980 he was arrested in an abduction gone wrong and confessed to killing 103 girls, but was released 8 years later for good behavior. Over the next 15 years he was arrested, released, and re-arrested before getting free in 98. He's currently still wanted for killing and over 300 girls in Peru, Colombia, and Ecuador. And finally, at number 1 is Xavier Dupont de Lagon. I put this one on the list because unsolved mysteries inspired me, to be honest, and the case is very interesting. So back in April of 2011, the family's neighbor got suspicious when the Lagon's home was boarded up and decided to call the police. The family was nowhere to be found until a letter came saying they had fled to the US since the parents were DEA agents. That was obviously fake, and after several police visits to the house, the bodies of the wife Agnes, the 4 kids, and the 2 dogs were all found buried in their garden. Xavier's body was not there, and neither was his car. So already we have prime suspect number 1, the dad. Now everyone had been shot by a rifle that Xavier had inherited from his dad 3 weeks prior. Apparently he was under crippling debt and had no money left, and as a count, he didn't want his children or the public to know the family was ruined. He also didn't want his kids to suffer any hardships either, so apparently he thought killing them was the best thing to do. After he fled, he didn't even hide. He was still using his credit card at places and waved at a security camera in southeastern France before taking off with his rifle and leaving his car. If he did commit suicide, the body was never found, and if he fled, well, he's still wanted. Starting us off at number 10 is Ricardo Ash. This guy has impressive qualifications. He's a gynecologist, obstetrician, endocrinologist, and a fugitive. He pioneered GIFT, aka gamete intrafallopian transfer, which is not something you'd think a criminal could be capable of doing. However, in 1995, Ricardo and his 2 partners were accused of taking women's eggs without their consent and using it for other patients so they could conceive. 15 children were born from the misuse of these eggs, but he wasn't arrested since technically this wasn't a crime. Worried he could somehow end up in jail, Ricardo sold his properties and fled to Mexico and was arrested in Argentina in 2004. An extradition request for him was denied, and he fled back to Mexico, where he was re-arrested in 2010. He was set for parole in 2011 and was released, but the US still wanted to extradite him, yet he's nowhere to be found. It's been 9 years, no one knows knows where the hell Ricardo is. And he stole some people's eggs, so he needs to get arrested.
At number 9, a man on the run. So another time in 2015, a man tried to escape a country through a bag. In Lima, Peru, a friend was dragging a really heavy bag and was acting nervous. He acted so nervous that officials asked him to open his bags. He did try to talk himself out of it, but the officials were unrelenting. So he gave up and opened his bag. The man inside the bag that was hiding was greeted by a dog that was sniffing the bag, which kind of a nice greeting. And then the man in the bag got out of it pretty casually, just knowing that he was caught. There was no use running away. Now, they didn't even make it to bag check. Did they really think they were gonna make it and flee Peru? I mean, if the man got checked in as a bag, there would still be the x-ray scan and they would see a human body in there. I just really want to know how far they think this plan would go. All the way? I doubt it. At number 8, we have a boy being smuggled. Now, another time in 2015, a 19-year-old Moroccan woman was looking nervous as she waited to cross the border. She was crossing at a land border crossing at Ceuta, a Spanish enclave city in North Africa. When the guards put her suitcase through a scanner, they discovered an 8-year-old boy in her suitcase. Just think about it. See the photo. So it turns out she was trying to smuggle the boy into Europe for her husband, the boy's father. At the border, she was detained as well as the father of the child eventually when he showed up. Now, since you obviously shouldn't try to put a person in a suitcase, especially a child, the Ceuta magistrate ordered the father to be held on charges of human rights abuse. Now, if you have the child's permission like David Dobrik did in one of his recent videos, the line, who knows? Plus, that was only for a couple minutes, not for an entire border crossing. But on to number 7, a YouTuber. An Australian YouTuber named Adam Saleh put out a YouTube video where he flew on a Tiger Airways flight in a suitcase. Now, it shows his friend zipping him in a suitcase and then picking him up after the flight. But Tiger Airways themselves tweeted back at Saleh and said that they saw a bunch of inconsistencies in the video. So no, he didn't make it across, all the way, in the suitcase. So the airway pointed out they had footage of him boarding the plane, plus that he was too heavy to be put on board as luggage as per their restrictions, and they also said he would have suffocated, or at least become a popsicle. Now, Saleh didn't expect the media attention as it was a prank for entertainment on his channel, but you do have to expect that airlines don't want people attempting this if they think it's true. If you think plane delays are bad now, just imagine if airlines keep finding people in suitcases. It's gonna be a big holdup. Really. At number 6, we have some Walmart shenanigans. So years ago, a guy went to Walmart with his buddies when they were bored. You know, how it is in the burbs. So that particular Walmart had had a lot of thefts lately, and this is important to remember. So when the group of teens got there, they were looking around trying to think of something to do when the main guy telling this story sees a suitcase. He gets many ideas, but convinces his buddies of one for sure. The manager of the store already answered their question about megaphones and is now seeing this group of teens cast glances around the store. So he's a bit suspicious. So then, the group of teens gets the main guy into the suitcase and they walk around the store with the talking suitcase, making noises, generally stirring a little fun among the other customers. So a bunch of people are giving them weird looks, but overall they're just having a grand old time. But then the manager spots the teens again and he just sees two guys dragging a heavy suitcase towards the front of the store. So with all of the thefts lately, he thinks the youths are just trying to run off with a bunch of liquor. Now, the teens catch on to the fact that the manager has caught them and the main guy escapes from the suitcase just so they can all make a run for it. Now the group of guys runs out with the manager hot on their heels and a cop that was sitting in the parking lot throws on its lights to try to chase them down. So the cop catches up and tells them that he got calls from the manager and they found the suitcase inside, but no liquor. So then the cop asks them what was in the suitcase. And so the main guy, who hid in the suitcase, just raises his hand. So the full story, if you want to read it in detail, is on Reddit by Pyronius. It's a fun one, I like the way he narrated it. On to number 5, bag on a train. Swiss officials found an Etrian man hiding in a suitcase. So it looks like the 6-foot guy shoved his body into a carry-on, and it's pretty unbelievable. It turns out the man was trying to catch a train from Italy to Switzerland without being caught. And the thing is, when you're that tall, trying to be confined into a carry-on, it's not comfortable, and he was making noises of discomfort, obviously. So those noises drew the attention of security who went to investigate the bag, and the man emerged from the bag with his hand unzipping the luggage, and then he popped out. Now, this was a first for officials who had seen people hiding in trunks of cars, but not luggage trunks. And the video itself, it's just kind of amazing to watch. Just the zipping, and then his arm comes out, and his head pops out, and he's like, hello! He doesn't say hello, he's just detained by officers, but... Now, to number 4, remember to pack your wife. So, a 60-something man was traveling from Nice to Moscow. He had a really big suitcase and was struggling to pull it along, because it appeared quite heavy to officials. Now, as I said, the officials, they got on and they discovered something unauthorized packed in his bag. It was his wife. His wife is a Russian woman in her 30s, and he believed that she wouldn't be allowed into the EU. And so his belief did have a hint of truth in it, since non-EU citizens wouldn't be allowed, but the thing is, his wife would, since she is married to an EU citizen. Him. Now, I find it funny that his first idea isn't to look up or double check that she isn't allowed or the different things that can be authorized, but his mind immediately went to, well, honey, if you want to go to Nice, you gotta get in the bag. Like, gee, how does his mind go there first? You know, think it through, people. Think it through. On to number 3. A baby. Now this is horrifying, okay? Back in 2016, a woman on an Air France flight from Istanbul to Paris allegedly smuggled her baby on a plane. Now, 3.5 hours into the flight, witnesses noticed that something in her bag was moving when she opened it, and they saw a baby girl. Now, this reportedly happened because the paperwork for her baby was not in order. It is said that she was past customs when she was stopped from boarding with the baby, and reports say that she bought another ticket, hid the baby, and went to a different gate to board a different flight. Now, in this case, this means the baby made it past the initial screening, but then was stopped afterwards. Also, once you get to the gate of an airplane, people only check passports and boarding passes, so it does seem plausible that the baby was hidden in the woman's cloth bag at this time. Still though, just think of the safety of that baby. It's just in a carry-on on a flight for hours. No, it's just too much. At number 2, guess what we have? A baby, again. So again, this year, not 3 years ago, this year, someone tried this. In September, officials explained that a US woman was carrying a 6-day-old baby in her luggage. They said she passed through the airport immigration counter without declaring that she was traveling with the baby, and they said that there was intent to hide that she was with the baby. She was caught at the boarding gate by airline personnel who searched her oversized suitcase and found the child inside the oversized suitcase. So she was arrested after she was found to not have any travel documents for the baby. Then after the woman was arrested, she gave officials an affidavit at the airport. The affidavit was allegedly from the baby's mother giving permission to take the child into the US, but it wasn't signed by the mother. Therefore, it's inadmissible in court. So now the case is being handled by anti-human trafficking investigators from Philippines National Bureau of Investigation because it's a very serious thing. You shouldn't try to smuggle a baby that is not yours into another country. I don't know why I'm staring off into the distance, but it should... People, you know? Now let's move on to number 1, a prison bust. So in January of 2017, a Venezuelan woman went to the prison where her husband is. She went along with their 6-year-old daughter, rolling along some of her daughter's toys in a bright pink suitcase. Then, while she was there for a visit, her husband popped into that suitcase in hopes for an escape. Now, their escape plan failed as guards noticed her having trouble pushing the overstuffed suitcase. And when they found her husband, just curled up in the suitcase along with the toys, they sent him right back to his cell to serve out the rest of his 10-year sentence for car robbery. Now, because of the attempted help in the prison escape, the wife was arrested and their daughter was taken into temporary custody by social services. So, prison escapes in a bright pink bag might not be the best bet. Just throwing that out there. Maybe. Who knows?